carried out its commitment in providing quality and affordable healthcare for the Filipinos. One of our advocacies is a continuing medical education for the doctors, considering their vital role in taking care of the patients and the unbelievable advancements in health information and technology. This advocacy is the anchor for organizing ECHO in order for us to be able to reach out to more healthcare practitioners. We are bringing in international experts, or as we call them, rock stars in the medical industry, so that we're able to facilitate a robust discussion among our own doctors and the internationally renowned experts about the latest studies and options in addressing patient needs. ECHO is made possible through the collaboration of 4 business units of Unilab within the ethical division, namely LRI-Therapharma, our division for cardiovascular and endometabolic diseases, Biofemme, our division for women's health, and Medichem, our division for mental health. I now turn you over to Dr. Carrie, the medical director of Biofemme, to tell you more about ECHO 2017.
Thank you, Claire. Good afternoon, everyone. So, just to share with you that when we started ECHO 3 years ago, this coincided with the 70th anniversary of Vienna. So, as Claire said, it was our commitment to our local doctors to bring in global experts. Just to share with you the past ECHO events that we've held. Next, please. So as a platform for exchange of ideas, learning, and interface with global experts, it has been very successful. That's why we are on our 3rd year. So these are the previous experts that we have invited to talk about the cutting-edge medicine and research. So just to let you know, it's not only the entertainment industry that brings in, Madonna and Coldplay. We also have our rock stars, as Claire said, in the medical community. So the relevance of the theme for this year, we've chosen to talk about degenerative conditions. So why did we choose this? Why did we find it very important to discuss this? It's because we are going to be dealing increasingly with a growing aging population. According to the World Health Organization, between 2000 and 2050, the number of people aged 60 and over is expected to double. So in 2050, more than 1 in 5 is 60 years or older. Next, please. So life expectancy by country, it seems that the longest life expectancy, we find it in Israel, France, and Japan. So is that correct, Professor? Yeah. So, lot of approval from Dr. Zimlichman. And how is Philippines doing? We're comparable with India. So we're at 68.5 years average, but if you further analyze between the genders, the females outlive the males by about 7 years. Now, depending on where you live, of course, increasing life expectancy is good. But depending on where you live, if you're in a developed country, that's also a positive economically because it means increasing human capital, increased productivity, increased economic growth. But if you're in a developing country, they say it poses also economic challenges. Here in Asia Pacific, I think the growth of the senior population is where it is greatest. And they say that the working class group will shrink. Maybe not in absolute numbers, but relative to the ratio of the working population and the retiree population. So we expect, so if you're a baby boomer or if you are a Generation Xer, we expect to spend more of your life probably in retirement than the years you spend being gainfully employed. And then retirees face the risk of outliving their savings because you will have to spend on their food, housing, and medical care. So those are economic challenges. And similarly, it poses medical challenges as well. Because with the rise of aging-related diseases and disabilities, the task of increasing the healthy and productive period of life becomes an urgent priority. So that's a new journal from the Journal of Aging and Disease. So there is a medical need to address chronic degenerative diseases and to improve the quality of life. So there's no point in prolonging or increasing life expectancy if the quality of life is poor. So it's equally important to focus on improving also the quality of life. Next, please. So according to the CDC, chronic degenerative diseases are the most common, costly, and preventable of all health problems. When you say degenerative diseases, these include your heart disease, your stroke, your cancer, your diabetes, and osteoporosis. And these conditions can also lead to anxiety and depression. So when we talk about degenerative disease or degeneration, the operative word there is deterioration or loss of function. So just like a machine, there's wear and tear with constant use. So usually we think of aging to be equivalent to degeneration. But now with the new concepts that we will be presenting at ECHO, we might be changing the way we think slightly differently. So we don't think of chronological aging anymore, but maybe we should start thinking about biological or cell aging. So I don't know if the experts will agree or if you will agree. I've read somewhere that they say that the body does not know its chronological age. It only functions how it feels or how it's biological, according to its biological age. Just to give you an example, you could be 60 years old, but if you have a good diet, proper lifestyle choices, you probably have a body of a 40-year-old. And conversely, if you're 25, but because of stress or smoking and alcoholism, probably you have a body of a 50-year-old. So, which brings us to, we're not focusing on aging, we're talking about degeneration or wear and tear. And we're going to be discussing 4 topics. First is cardiovascular disease, diabetes and how it relates to low testosterone levels or hypogonadism, anxiety and depression and how it is linked with cardiometabolic syndrome, and also osteoporosis in the menopause. So for the first topic tomorrow at the ECHO, this will be presented by Dr. Reuven Zimlichman, our expert from the Tel Aviv University. And before I call on him to talk about this topic, to give you a brief overview about the mechanisms of vascular aging and hemodynamic consequences, just to give you a brief of a grounding on the Philippine situation. Cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death here in the Philippines. So it's always been in the top 10, but in the past 10 years, it has been number 1. So next, please. And they say that 90% of all Filipinos are exposed to one or more risk factors for cardiovascular disease. So if I may call on Dr. Zimlichman to give his thoughts on the topic.
Good day. It was well said in the introduction that we can separate between the chronological age, which we can bring in our ID or driver's license or passport, and the biological age. And the biological age differs from the chronological age. What makes these differ are several factors. First of all, genes. Genes are very strong. These are very important at the moment, maybe in the future, but at the moment we cannot change them. But what we can do is change other things. We can change our lifestyle. We can change the way we supervise our bodily function, correct what is wrong. And this can be done easily if you have the proper system and you have the proper will. I can tell you that, for instance, in my country, in Israel, during the last 15 years, the death of #1 killer cardiovascular disease in the world, in the Philippines, went down by 50%. And according to We always compare our results to the OECD, which is the main results of health in Europe. Israel today is #1 leader in cardiovascular mortality and morbidity reduction. And they are very, very impressive data. The last information that was published, lifespan is 79, it's now for men 81.5, and for women 83.6, which adds another 2 years comparing to the data from 2 years ago. So it is very important to do it to extend our lifespan. We look at the data that we have. If you look back in the 15th, 16th century, the lifespan was less than 50. And if the lifespan is less than 50, there were no cardiac diseases. Almost nobody died from heart disease. Why? Because occlusion of coronary artery takes time. And we start to see in people that are of highest risk appearance of myocardial infarction in the late 40s, 50s, 60s, and on. So years ago, when the lifespan was 50, there were no heart disease. There were additional factors that influenced also, like not enough food in the world, which prevented obesity, thus prevented diabetes, dyslipidemia, etc. But the change in the population today brings us to the situation that cardiovascular disease are #1 killer in the whole world. Now we can affect it. There are things that we can do. We can affect by understanding genes and predicting the future of each person. We can affect it by instruction to change lifestyle and to discover every problem and treat it in order to prevent the results of the disease that we have here if it's not true. So I think that these are the most important things that we can bring as help to the population, to do the right things, to lower the probability of disease, to cure disease, and to prevent. Prevent is much cheaper and easier than curing disease or taking care of the chronic disease for life. One another concept I would like to mention briefly is during the years, the lifespan becomes longer and longer, we are faced with new problems that were not existent before. Maybe the human being wasn't planned to live 80 years, or 90 years, or 100 years. So what happens? People continue to live, but their systems have failed. For the bones, we have a nice presentation about osteoporosis and menopause, osteoporosis, and connection to the hormonal studies. So we invented a solution. We can replace the hip joint, we can replace the knee joint. We have new medications to strengthen the bone. So this is one solution. What happens to the eye? With age, people develop cataract. We developed a method to change, to cure cataract. The heart valve fails, and we replace. Two things that we are lagging behind in ability of replacement. It's the vascular system, the blood vessels, and the brain. Here a nice presentation from my colleague tomorrow, and I will try to talk about the blood vessels, how we detect first disease in early stages before it becomes critical, and what we do in order to prevent further development of cure. I think what is my time? Nothing. As a
Thank you, Dr. Zimlichman. That gives me another type of age to add to my different ages. There's biological, there's chronological, and there's also arterial age and brain age. Okay, so for the next topic tomorrow to be discussed at the ECHO is about insulin resistance and how it relates to low testosterone levels or hypothyroidism. To be presented by Dr. Paresh Dandona from New York. He cannot be here today, but he's flying in later in the evening, I think. So, but just to give a bit of a background, not all of us may be familiar with insulin resistance. Insulin is the hormone that the body produces so that we're able to utilize glucose. So maybe insulin resistance is a not so familiar term, but we're more familiar with diabetes. They're not equivalent, they're not the same, but this could be the prelude or the starting point for diabetes. In the Philippines, diabetes, as with the rest of the world, it's rising at an alarming rate. So we expect by 2030 in the Philippines we'll have about 7.8 million cases of diabetes, of which type 2 is the most common. We find the highest incidence in the richest wealth index, those living in the urban areas and those in the 60 to 69 year age. We have around 1.7 million estimated people with type 2 diabetes that remain undiagnosed or undetected. So, as mentioned, you might have some familiarity with diabetes. Somebody might be taking care of somebody with diabetes. So, what's new about the topic tomorrow? What's interesting there is Dr. Dandona will try to show how it might be related to low testosterone levels. Low testosterone or hypogonadism could be a risk factor for developing insulin resistance, and conversely, testosterone might be. So we'll hear tomorrow what is it, the role in probably better managing glucose levels. The third topic tomorrow is from Dr. Siegfried Kasper from Vienna. We'll be discussing depression and anxiety in the cardiometabolic syndrome. So before I call on him, just to show you some Philippine stats. In the Philippines, we have about 4.5 million Filipinos with depression. Sorry. That's in 2015. According to the WHO, 1 out of 3 will not be aware of their condition, and only 1 out of 3 will consult specialists. So the reality here is in the Philippines, there's a stigma associated with depression and mental illness. People don't want to talk about it. It's not openly discussed. So what happens is depression becomes undiagnosed, undetected, untreated. So let's call on Dr. Kasper.
Thank you very much for this very kind introduction. You gave already a nice overview of what we discussed during this topic, and I will continue what Professor Zimlichman said, that we have good replacements for the hips, for the knees, for the replacement of the vessels, and no replacements for the brain. This is very important, and this brings me to the topic. Quite often, when we talk about psychiatry, and we think, coming from Vienna, about Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud, of course, is wonderful, right? But if Sigmund Freud would live nowadays, he would love all these brain mechanisms, which we are now able to understand. And I will think it's very important when we talk about depression and anxiety, we talk about brain medicine, because that's the organ where it takes place when depression, anxiety comes out and to be understood. So quite often, since it's a psychological symptoms, it's thought it can only be cured by psychological method, talking cure, just talking. And the depressed, just talking. Well, talking is of course good if you have hypertension. It's nice if you talk to somebody, right? But if the doctor knows how to lower hypertension, it's also very good. And usually I use the analogy with my patients, like the doctor of internal medicine. When he lowers your blood pressure, then he advises you to continue with this medication. But in psychiatry, it's quite often, if they cure the depression and say, oh, depression is gone, okay, get rid of all this medication. And we forget it's a kind of a brain mechanism which is now understood to be related to different hormones. Cortisol is very important. Catecholamines are important. So the mind meets the brain, and the brain is also linked to genes, of course, because we know that some of these structures, like the serotonin transporter, for instance, or all our medication work, like the serotonin reuptake inhibitor, have a different genetic sort of variation, short allele, long allele, if you wish. So the short allele are those who are more vulnerable to get depression or anxiety. So also in psychiatry, I tell it my patients in this way, when they ask me, doctor, where does depression come from? And I say, well, it's something like my old hair up here, right? So do you think I used the wrong shampoo? Probably not, right? So that's the reason I get old hair and get depression. Nobody knows. If I would know, I would get the Nobel Prize right away. We understand it a little bit, but depression comes from, it's related to the brain and also to the genes. Of course, if the individual is tortured in their early life, like child life, then we know one of the outcome variables later is that the patient has a higher probability to have a depression. But most of our patients do not have this terrible experience in early childhood. So with this said, I would like to mention that you do not die from depression, although suicide rates are quite high in depression. But you have a high disability within the disease. And cardiovascular diseases and psychiatric diseases, depression, anxiety, they rank on top of the disability-adjusted life years called DALYs. That means how much you're not able to function or work, like if it's 1 month, 2 months, then it adds up to years. Those are figures also used by the World Bank, for instance, to calculate how much is needed. And usually when I give lectures to politicians in my country or in Europe, then I say, well, please invest into psychiatric illnesses, because it's a good investment, because not treated psychiatric illnesses is too expensive. They stay home and so on and so forth. So nowadays we have quite good treatment for these patients which were not available like 30, 40 years ago. We have medication with a very low side effect profile. Unfortunately, medication is not as good as in cardiovascular disease. So I think in cardiovascular disease you have better medication. I think also your research in cardiovascular disease is far ahead from psychiatry still, because we still have the notion that kind of depression, anxiety is linked more to a religious concept somewhere, not to a medical concept. And therefore, I think we need to bring it down to earth to a medical concept to treat the patients also very effectively with good medication. With having said this, I think with regard to the cardiovascular metabolic syndrome, it's quite often if a patient presents himself with somatic symptom to a doctor, the likelihood that the patient gets diagnosed with depression, anxiety is very low. When he presents with psychological symptoms, and of course, that's a higher chance. But usually in my country, but I think very likely in your country also, when you go to a doctor, you think the doctor is responsible for the body. So you tell him all these body symptoms: I cannot sleep, I have low energy, I have some discomfort in my body somewhere, some pain. And then the doctor says, okay, why don't we check for rheumatism, check for this and this and this and this. And quite often the doctors are a little bit afraid. I better do not ask for psychological or psychiatric symptoms, because then I have to sit forever with this patient and he tells me all his family history, his personal history, and I don't have the time for this, because 50 other patients are waiting outside. But I always instruct the doctors, well, if you ask the correct questions, it's not more difficult than for other somatic diseases. So psychiatric disorders, depression, anxiety, it's not a myth, it's a medical disease like all the other diseases. And with my patients, I usually use hypertension as a model, or diabetes as a model, or asthma as a model, and tell them, well, when we bring you down the symptomatology, then the medication which cures you should also be continued for a longer time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kasper. That was very interesting, the brief overview. It also calls attention to the need to give priority also. Probably doesn't take as much focus as the somatic diseases that we're prioritizing, but mental health should also, if we're going to be taking care of our patients and improving quality of life, the mental psychiatric condition should also be considered. The last topic for tomorrow will be preventing osteoporosis, a plan of sequential management from Dr. Rodney from Australia. He's an obstetrician gynecologist, expert in the menopause. So you might be wondering, osteoporosis is a disease of both men and women. Why get an OBGYN specialist? Well, it seems that osteoporosis disproportionately affects more women, especially when they enter the menopause. Like what Dr. Zimlichman said earlier, in the early ages, people didn't live long enough. Here, in women, they didn't even live long enough to enter into the menopause. But in the 20th century, you see that people are living longer and longer. The females are spending a good third of their lives already in the menopause. In the Philippines, the average age of menopause in Filipinas is 48. And women are more prone to brittle bones and fractures because of estrogen loss after the menopause. So there, that's for the last topic tomorrow. Which brings us to the program for ECHO tomorrow, but we'll open the floor for your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Carey, Dr. Zimlichman, and Dr. Kasper. We now open the floor to questions.
Good afternoon, doctors. First, if we compare the economic activity of a person who is healthy and a person who has, say, cardiovascular disease or has depression, if a healthy person is 100% productive, what would be the difference in the productivity of a person with depression or cardiovascular disease? How is their economic productivity diminished?
First of all, I think that Professor Kasper is more experienced in these aspects, but we can see depression as a depression, and depression as a result of a problem. So it's very reasonable to see somebody who is sick, somebody who underwent myocardial infarction, is now limited, he is afraid, he doesn't know what he is allowed to do, he is afraid from death, from complication. And this is what we call secondary depression, which results from their advanced stage. On the contrary, many of Professor Kasper's patients have also primary depression, in which it is very difficult to find a real cause because of the depression. So in my field, let's say somebody after myocardial infarction, the psychological aspects are part of the treatment, because a patient that is going to be discharged from the hospital after having severe myocardial infarction. He is afraid, he is depressed, he is unsure of his future, of his work, of his life. He starts to ask questions, what is forbidden, what he can do, when he can do. Very frequently we ask, what about sexual relationship? Are we forbidden? This is an effort, maybe they can call it. They are afraid. Also sexual function declines in such cases for a limited time. And one of the tasks of the physician is to give them a feeling of security, to explain about things that they will feel. And this secondarily will improve the mood and decrease depression and symptoms. And there are much more aspects. I'm sure Professor Kasper will.
No, thank you very much. I think for depression, it's quite important that we have to acknowledge, together with cardiovascular disease, that disability is a quite high proportion. And you can also see that disability, for instance, do not work like the household, like females work in the household, then they cannot do the household anymore, and somebody else come into the house. So the disability adjusted with this disease is very high. And as I said before, to uncover the depression, like in Europe, there are data that half of the patients come to the doctors, they are not diagnosed with depression. So primarily because the patients, they feel so insecure to talk about their depressed mood or the inability to move. And we know there are some brain mechanisms behind this, and we know that we can help them. So one point is also, sometimes you thought, well, depression is something like a flu or like a pneumonia. It comes once in a life, and then it's gone again. But this is the wrong model. It's a model like hypertension. When you start having it, then very likely you continue to have it, unless it's linked to traumatic events like to an unhappy marriage or to an unhappy work situation, which needs to be clarified as a stressor. Then
So they can go from contributor to liability with the those kind of diseases. They go from contributor to liability to liability.
I'm not sure if I can understand.
They become liability to the society because
They can be rehabilitated to society when properly treated. First is the diagnosis, and then the proper treatment, that all the symptoms are going away. Like before, we were talking about high blood pressure. I'm sorry to say that Dr. Helen is much higher. He said, well, it has to be below 140 and 80, otherwise you're in trouble. In depression, it's like this. If you have residual symptoms, which are very often somatic symptoms, the patient says, well, I have some headache, and I have some drowsiness, and I have these and these symptoms. And the likelihood that the depression comes back is higher than without this residual symptoms. It has to be cured as in other medical areas.
as follow-up questions later.
Yes, ma'am. My question is for Dr. Kasper. Can you tell us the statistics of suicide in relation to depression in the Philippines and globally, and does it increase each year, and what could be the reason? And um, my second question is, as doctors, how can we encourage the lay to seek medical help rather than thinking that depression is just related to religious beliefs?
Well, thank you very much. Altogether, and the data from the WHO, the World Health Organization, indicating that the suicide rates are going down. I'm not so quite sure if I know the data of the Philippines correctly, but it's going down worldwide. And one important thing, suicide is in 95%, mostly all the time, related to depression. So the few studies which have been carried out with suicide victims, like Dr. Mann in New York is one of the colleagues who collects the postmortem brain, he always finds characteristic changes in brain physiology. So practically speaking, suicide is always related to depression, mild, moderate, or severe. And I personally, as a doctor, I'm 40 years psychiatrist, I do not believe in the free will to commit suicide. I don't think this exists. I saw so many patients who said, well, doctor, I do not want to live anymore after treatment, 2 or 3 weeks. Then the patients are out of depression. Well, I give you another example. There's a new medication which is called ketamine. The patient comes in, is heavily suicidal. We give him this ketamine infusion. After 20 minutes, he says, no, this was a bad idea. I do not want to commit suicide anymore. So it's a biological mechanism in the brain linked to suicidality. And I do not want to go too far, but also, like if you talk to zoologists, like in animals, we do not have suicide also in them. So it is always a kind of a disease problem. The second question, I do not recall correctly again.
What could be the reason of their suicidal tendencies?
Or the reason for the suicidal tendency is linked to the depression physiology, and it's linked to a lower activity of certain brain metabolites related to serotonin and also to norepinephrine, but very likely also to the GABAergic system. Why do I say this? Because if you give medication to change this level, then you get rid also of these different physiological changes. And the third question was how to overcome this depression to get rid of the sort of the religious beliefs. I think most of the worldwide monotheistic religions, they believe that some psychiatric illness is led to some demons or some god, things like the Catholic religion. They also have this exorcism and all these kind of things. So it's very important that depression is a brain disease. So I think the way out is it's a brain disease. It's not a religious disease. I have a number of priests or nuns, or also of other religions, of Muslim or Israeli religion. They also get depressed. Like it goes through different kind of religious. I think the way out is that it's a brain disease, and it's linked to brain health and to have like not only a bone health, a cardiovascular health, we need to have also brain health.
Yes, I just say this. Good afternoon. Is it true that the person's environment can be factor to suicide?
Well, let's put it this way: if there is a healthy individual and realizes this environment is not good for me, the healthy individual says, let's get out of here. I'm gonna go down with the environment. But if the individual is not so healthy and doesn't have the capability to get out of this, then the individual sort of gets this torture, which brings him into this direction to better not to live anymore. So I think as a doctor, of course, you do not only talk about symptoms, you try to engage also the family or the working environment. Then you say, well, listen, this is probably not very good for you. Sometimes I say also, well, if I would be in the same situation, I also would feel very bad. The patient says, oh, you also feel bad. Well, there are certain circumstances you need to avoid. but it's the guide from the doctor to make the patient more stable again, that the patient can decide, well, I get out of this situation, which is sometimes not easy if you're married to a person who, well, tortures you all the time. Well, in Catholic religion, you cannot get a divorce, right? In other religions, you can get a divorce, but you still are in big trouble, right? So I think this is a kind of a psychotherapeutic lead then, but the medical situation is to make the person as strong as possible to make his decisions themselves. To have suicide, all these people who do torture, they know also how to bring the people into the system, and I think this is also to understand, but it can be understood at a brain health level.
Thank you, Dr. Kasper. Just a follow-up question to the question of Mr. Maximilian of Business Mirror. I'd like to address this question to Dr. Carrie. Since you mentioned a while ago that there's stigma on mental health conditions, I would just like to ask, since you have been, your group has been engaging doctors from different specialties, if nowadays there's more acceptance among the different specialties in considering possible mental health problems when they see their patients.
Right now, there now medical practice globally. We're keeping up with the trend that we're doing a more we're going towards a trend of a multidisciplinary and comprehensive approach. So, like our experts have mentioned, it's not just somatic treatment or symptomatic treatment. As you see it, that's what you give. That's what you treat. Now we're going into a more comprehensive approach of, you're managing cardiovascular disease, but you also look for the mental element. Is there associated with depression? So we try to we try to screen, we try to diagnose, and then we also try to modify risks. The risks are there, but if there's when you take a history or when you manage, you try to identify risk factors and you try to modify. Because not all patients will present with the same risk factors, like genetics. That's something you can control. What else? Genes, disease. So it's, to answer your question, yes, doctors are doing that now. Management of cases is not, we're taking a more comprehensive and collaborative approach between, among the specialists to have better management outcomes. I'd just like to add, we were talking about suicide rates and depression in the Philippines. I'd just like to share that suicide rates are one of the lowest in the Philippines, but that's not indicative of how prevalent is depression in the Philippines. It's lowest among the Asian countries, but as mentioned, we have there's no registry, there's no clear record of how prevalent is depression and how we compare the other countries.
Thank you, Dr. Carrie. Yes, sir.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Mr. Dr. Kasper. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is depression somehow harder to detect because you see it and as opposed to having heart problems or can actually see it? I mean, is there a way for you to diagnose if a person really has depression or if it's just really easy? Something like that. And I have another question also for you. This is for Dr. Carrie, will be able to answer it. But it's about medical summit. Like I understand the medical practitioners being present, but who are these people? I mean, do they get to register for free? Do we invite them?
So this question is quite often asked, and sometimes I envy my colleagues in cardiovascular disease. They have blood measurements, right? And they do blood. When I do my own blood measurements, I also get different values all the time. And when I go to the doctor, it's different. And when I go to the other doctor, it's different. So it's probably not that easy to measure the blood pressure. But saying this, I think our measurement of the blood pressure is like the Hamilton depression score or the Montgomery-Åsberg depression score with 12 to 14 questions, and I encourage always the doctors when I treat them, well, ask the very specific questions like you measure the blood pressure, right? And if you ask this question, it doesn't take more than 5, maximum 10 minutes. If you ask them these very specific questions, and altogether, like a mosaic, it comes to you, well, this is depression. Of course, the patient always relates it to his personal life. You should see my wife, then you could understand how depressed I am, or you could see my husband, then you understand immediately. You say, well, it might be, but I don't know. How was it yesterday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? Did you have a lot of energy, or did you have no energy? And you say, well, in the afternoon it was good, but in the morning it was very bad. My husband or my wife. So, you know, all this family history and all this surrounding that always spoils the symptomatology, right? So if the doctor of internal medicine measures the blood pressure and the patient constantly talks about his marriage problems, he said, well, at some moment we have to measure now the blood pressure, right? And don't talk about all this. We talk later about this. It's very important that we talk about this, but not now. And then we also talk about sleep quality, how long did it take you to fall asleep, how many times did you wake up, when was night over for you? Like for instance, the patient said, well, night was over at 4 o'clock in the morning, right? And then I couldn't sleep anymore. It's very characteristic that the brain metabolism changes already because cortisol starts rising, catecholamines are rising, then the patient cannot sleep anymore. And this is very characteristic for a depressive symptomatology. There are key questions which need to be asked, and then I think it's as easy as measure a high blood pressure in the patient. So it's not a myth, but as soon as you start embarking in all these psychosocial environments, then you are lost because it has all different kinds of things. So since most of the depressed patients are with general practitioner, I think all of the general practitioner, I always teach them, if they do not know how to measure depression, then they shouldn't know how to measure high blood pressure also, right? So it's as easy. It's not a myth about measuring depression.
But doctor, how can a person, or is there a way for an individual to know, or what are the telltale signs that, you know, if, for example, how do I know if I'm going into depression? And what are the red flags for me to seek treatment? I mean, if I'm having high blood pressure, it's you know, there's numbers, but how do a person know that he or she should seek treatment?
Well, the person knows that you seek treatment when you cannot fulfill your daily tasks anymore, which are different in the time. And the patient says, well, listen, doctor, before I loved to go to these conferences like this, but then I feel like, oh my God, there's another conference, terrible, and I drag myself. Well, I go there because I get some payment, but still, it's a nightmare for me to be there. But 1 year before, with pleasure, I went to these conferences here and I took notes and everything, and you notice this difference in his lifestyle, right? And so lazy would be a connotation already, which can be explained. We call it like low drive. Low drive would be more on the neutral side, because lazy would be, well, this kind of personality disorder.
Thank you, Dr. Kasper. We'll address first a question for Dr. Kelly before we go to Ms. Ching and Anna.
Well, to answer your question about ECHO, ECHO is different from our other initiatives. Sometimes we have our product presentations, etc. But ECHO is different. It's a congress specifically for continuing professional education. It's also an advocacy on the part of Unilab. It's a non-profit initiative. It's a way of keeping the doctors, the local doctors, abreast of all the updates that are there. So we want doctors to practice the way Dr. Kasper does it, say in Vienna, or Dr. Zimlichman does it in this country, Israel. So we want our doctors to be world class as well. So if it means bringing in the experts here to share their knowledge, then that's what we do. And I think the ones who will benefit in the end is actually the Filipino patient, because they're getting quality healthcare from doctors who have higher competency levels and actually world class. No, it's just right now we're bringing in general practitioners, family physicians. It depends on the topics that we choose. So if we're going to come up with a conference on women's health, then invite obstetrician gynecologists. If it's on diabetes, we bring in the endocrinologist specialists or the internist. If it's mostly mental health, we bring in those who are specialists, psychiatrists, neurologists, etc. Yes, they are invited. No registration. Yes.
We have a question from Ms. Ching.
Some people do not so and there are many reasons why people get depressed. And the only one is
But Ms. Ching is not the president.
So I can explain the difference between male depression and female depression. Traffic makes me angry. I don't get depressed. But I think you very nicely pointed out, like in the old days, like 40, 50 years ago, there were different types of depression. Depression when you move from one house to the other. Depression when the children leave the family. Depression when you change your work environment. All of these are different kinds of depression, and we have thick books about this, you know. Nowadays, depression is quite uniform, and let's put it this way. Every brain can be depressed. My brain, your brain, but there's a certain threshold that the brain gets depressed. So when you, even have a genetic vulnerability for depression, it usually comes out at the age of 40, around this, pretty much at the same time span when hypertension comes out. And then if you are lucky, then you have enough protective factors to protect you. For instance, like you have a good family life. The family life is more healthy for a male than for a female, right? So the females, they do not need this family life because they are gathered in groups together, but the males, they more dependent on females. I'm quite sure if the group agrees with this, but this is usually the situation because the males, they still are the lonesome heroes and go out for fighting and so, you know, so usually they start fighting then. So I think the message is that every brain has the capability to get depressed, and there are ubiquitous stressors which can make it. And of course, changes in the environment always are some changes. And if the patient is depressed, and of course I would ask you, how's your situation? You're still traveling alive, you move with it. And when they told me they moved, right, from one house to the other, or from one city to the other, then there should be at least a stressor for this individual, which is not good. Some other people, they move constantly and they love this, right? So this is a different situation. It needs to keep it uniform.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kasper. Since you mentioned the difference between the threshold of men and women, we have two questions here, and this is for Dr. Zimlichman. The first one is, why do women have longer lifespan than men? And the second question is, how would people know if they have underlying cardiovascular disease if they don't feel anything?
Okay, the first question can be disputed. Professor Kasper can help me. Some men say that the women kill the men. I don't think so. There are differences, physiological differences between men and women. And as long as women are in premenopause period, they are better protected than they are protected in the postmenopausal period. And at this time, they are also better protected than men. So they have about 50 years in which disease progresses slowly and without any symptom. It progresses in a lower rate than men. Probably this is the reason. There are many differences between men and women, the history of work, the tasks that they take during their life, but the biological difference is that they have quite a longer period of time in which they are protected. Now, the next question would be, and maybe we can ask the expert that will arrive tonight and talk tomorrow, why not to give supplemental hormonal therapy to women and to continue the similar hormonal profile throughout the whole lifespan? This is a question because there were some questions. Additions of artificial hormones were suspected to cause cardiovascular damage, which slowly shows today as probably not true, but we have new information about that. But these are the main differences, and I think that if you have half of your life lower progression of disease, you will see the results at the end of your life. Now, what was the second question?
The second question is, how would people know if they have underlying cardiovascular disease if they don't feel anything?
Okay, this is 1 billion question. It is very important, and it is very important to become part of basic education of the population. We can have hints. The hints can be, first of all, my family history. If my parents had cardiovascular diseases, probably I got some genes from them. So I have a greater chance to get hypertension, diabetes, myocardial infarction, etc., etc. So if somebody looks at his family history, this is one of the strongest hints for his future. Now, there are additional cardiovascular risk factors, like present diseases. One of them, which becomes more and more important, is weight gain and obesity. When we gain weight, our blood pressure tends to go up, our glucose tends to go up, our lipids tend to go up, and we are exposed to higher risks. This will make us to go and check. If somebody has a risk factor, he has to go to his physician and ask for checkup that will reveal things that will cause a disease and which are at the moment asymptomatic. Blood pressure is asymptomatic. Elevated glucose levels until certain limits are also asymptomatic. And of course, high lipids in the blood will feel nothing. But first of all, we have to check. We have to look for everybody and to examine everybody. It's not always easy. So we have to start somewhere. So we have to locate the high-risk populations, those with family history, those with way of life that will expose them to diseases like heavy smokers, like alcohol drinkers, like physical inactivity, improper habits of eating. All these will cause disease, and those people are in risk. If we detect them early, we can prevent the disease. For instance, atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis is a process of deposition of lipids in the wall of the artery. We know today that atherosclerosis starts around the age of 18. And the major studies discovered that where the American soldiers killed in Vietnam, that underwent biopsy, and, underwent a pathological examination. And to the surprise, almost all of them had slightly streaks, small amounts of fats deposited on the wall. So it starts around the age of 18, and it progresses gradually, which means that every year the fatty streak which is adhered to the wall of the artery becomes thicker and thicker. Now, when the artery will be occluded and will cause myocardial infarction or stroke or other organ damage, it depends on the rate of growth of this fatty streak. Now, in those that have other risk factors, family history, their father had myocardial infarction at the age of 40 or 50 or 55, etc. The rate of growth of the obstruction of the artery by lipids is faster. So we start to see myocardial infarctions usually in the age of 40, 45, 50. These will happen in the fast growers of the atherosclerosis. Now, in those that have less risk factor, less danger, the total occlusion will occur 10 years later, but it will happen. Now, all these stages are asymptomatic, totally asymptomatic. Nobody knows. When I have a patient, I send him for coronary angiography, and he comes back, and I discuss with him about the results. I tell him, okay, you know what is the difference between you and me? We know how your coronary arteries are. I don't know how mine are. Okay, so after you did the test, you know to estimate. Now, this is a very, very important part, because let's say 50 years ago, somebody had myocardial infarction. What was the treatment? He got sedatives. He was lying in bed for 21 days, and the lights were dimmed. He was supposed to stay in minimal disturbance, to rest, to give rest to his body and to his mind. This was a treatment. There were some medications, such as aspirin, etc. But the result was a question of faith. Some people died, some people survived, and that's it. The invention of coronary angiography, the first angiography was performed by a physician who could not get approval for a study to do this to patients, so he did this to himself. So he pushed the catheter through his artery, through the heart, injected, take the picture, took the picture, and showed here is a new method. This new method was complete change in survival. It decreased in the next 10 to 20 years, decreased mortality from heart disease by more than 50%. Before that, somebody who had myocardial infarction, he was sick, he became sicker, and finally he died. Today, a young person with very high risk, he gets symptoms at the age of 40 or 45. He gets coronary angiography. His occluded sites are open, and he goes back to his family and community as a healthy man. The only difference, he has to be followed up. He has to take medications for hypertension, for lipids, for glucose if he has problems. But this changed extremely his future. So today we are able to save these patients, and heart attack or ischemic heart disease are not a life-threatening condition. Now, in my introduction, I told you that in Israel we succeeded to lower mortality and morbidity from ischemic heart disease much more than in European countries. I will give you the secret. We educated population for many preventive measures. We educated population. If you have symptoms, call a transportation or ambulance and rush to the hospital. If the country purpose is that every symptom of vascular disease, whether it's brain problem or heart problem, should be in the hospital and receive treatment within 90 minutes. I think in Manila it's impossible because of traffic.
That's right, sir.
But we have very successful, and all the hospitals in my country are rated according to the mean time. We call it door to catheter time. And today we can prevent myocardial infarction if it's treated in time. We can prevent a stroke. We do thrombolysis to a patient that comes with a stroke, and he can go home healthy, which is unheard of before, not even 10 years ago. So we can save people, and we can prevent lifelong disability. That's why it's so important. Because if a coronary artery is occluded, or cerebral artery is occluded, the area that is supplied by this artery dies. There is no myocardial area, there is a scar, which results in permanent heart disease and heart failure. And in case of stroke, it is associated with disability, limitations, severe limitations. We need to support the patient all his life in institution or by family. All these today can be prevented. So we can prevent creation of the factors that induce obstruction of the heart, which is the most important. And we can prevent the process when it starts, when the treatment was done in time. And
if there's a growing number of transsexual models, and you mentioned about the number of the lifespan of men and women. How would those men injecting hormones for women, those women injecting hormones? How about the lifespan?
Well, as a matter of fact, we have a program on transsexuals in Vienna, and as you see, this is not very big, this program. What we look at females to males, when we look at their psychiatric symptoms, females to males are doing better on a psychiatric level because the testosterone in the brain causes change of the metabolism, and we measure this with positron emission tomography. We could show that there's an increase of the serotonin transporters, basically the same what the serotonin reuptake inhibitors are doing to change the metabolism. When females to males, they have to take cyproterone acetate to lower down testosterone. Usually they feel very sluggish. They say, now I have my gender, but they feel sluggish and do not show this much temperament. So on a psychiatric level, the females to males are doing better, but of course we do not have them for a longer run. Right now, the policy in this group of patient changes. In the older days, you had to wait until you are 30, 40 years old, and nowadays there's a policy to do it at an earlier stage to prevent them that they go through all different kinds of stages and then feel more and more rough. But this needs to be understood on a long-term level. It would be a wonderful, of course, research question, what the lack of estrogen does to the brain. So for psychiatry, interesting, schizophrenia usually in male age starts with the age of 16, and in females it starts with 19, right? So the estrogens seem to protect the brain a little bit from the psychosis outcome. So they have some protection effect.
Yes, Jason.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, the Philippines is entering its summer season, and our summer season is getting hotter than before. Is there any correlation between extreme climatic conditions and cardiovascular symptoms like heat stroke?
yes, there is. And first of all, I see it every time. For instance, if you talk about hypertension, when you are in warm conditions, your blood pressure goes down. And sometimes you can see somebody that lost consciousness, syncope, he fell down, and you look, it was a warm, heated room, let's say in Europe during the winter, and the heat the air. So warm temperature causes dilatation of the arteries. You know, our body is an engine. It uses fuel, oxygen, and glucose. And one of the things that are created is heat. And the body has to dispose of the heat. So disposing of heat in cold condition is easy. Disposing of heat in warm condition is not always easy. It is associated with sweating and drying of the sweat, releasing energy. So if you are wet and you stand in the wind, you feel cooler because the water on your skin evaporates and you have the cooling effect. It costs energy. Now, we see very frequently changes in different times of year in blood pressure. As I said, dilatation of the arteries and lowering blood pressure in warm climate, and the opposite in cold climate. Now, this is also associated with the frequency of appearance of heart attacks. Typical description is, let's say, in Europe, when somebody has asymptomatic atherosclerosis, knows nothing, thinks he's healthy, and let's say he's going out from his warm, heated house to the street when where the temperature can be 0 centigrade. The cold causes vasoconstriction, less blood flow, higher blood pressure, bigger effort to the heart, more oxygen is needed for the heart, and if there is subclinical atherosclerosis, this heart will not receive the amount of oxygen it needs, and this can lead to acute myocardial infarction, to heart attack. So those are very well described and known stories that climate can affect our health chronically and also in acute conditions by developing myocardial infarction, heart attack, in a very cold weather. This is well known and described easily.
So on the average, is there a specific age or age bracket wherein degenerative diseases affect a person's productivity?
Of course, as we mentioned before, there are chronological age, which is counted according to your driver's license or ID certificate, and there is biological age. Now, this is the most important organ in evaluation of biological and chronological age are the arteries. In my research institute, the university, we have equipment and methods to determine the age of the arteries. So the patient undergoes a series of tests. We evaluate how stiff the arteries are, how they are able to dilate and constrict. And with these patients, when we finish the series of evaluation, we can say, okay, chronological age, as in your ID, is 60, but your arteries are at the age of 80. All your arteries are at the age of 40. So this means this is a result of accumulated factors during many years that affected the arteries. So let's say if the person lives improper way of life, or he has bad genes from his parents, or he is heavy smoker, he is heavy drinker, all those affects his arteries. And the changes develop during years. It's not a question of a week or a month to 1 year. Changes in arterial properties, it's no use to do it more than once a year. If you do the test now and next month, you won't see difference because it takes a long time to change, to worsen or to improve. Sometimes we have a patient with very bad results, and we normalize his blood pressure, we lower his glucose, we lower his lipids, and we ask him to return for recheck in 1 year, and faster, better. So there is a control, right? I am 1 year older now, but I am 2 years younger with the age of my heart. This shows us how important it is to treat and prevent progression of disease. And it is possible. It's very important because many people do not know that. It is possible to make our biological age younger. Somebody will start training, will change his diet, will take medications and normalize many factors which are not in the normal range before. His biological age can become younger. So he adds numbers to his years. He lowers the biological age and the ability of his systems to survive for many years in the future.
Thank you, Doctor. We have more questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, lifestyle is very, very difficult to change because it's difficult to change our personality. They can confirm what I say. It is much easier to swallow a tablet in the morning and that's it. Then we change what we eat, change the activity we do, stop things that we like to do and are not always healthy. So lifestyle change is whatever you define as very difficult. That's why success is not guaranteed. But you know, even I have patients that low myocardial infarction, they release from the intensive care unit, one day they go home. The hospitalizations because of the technology are relatively short. And he goes home, and before he goes home, my physician or himself will sit with the patient and explain what he should do and what he shouldn't do. So if we talk about losing weight, we have excellent success 3 months after discharge from hospital. We lose everything after 6 months. So at the beginning, the patient is frightened. He thought he's going to die. He promises his family and himself that he will change everything. But nature is strong, and people gradually return to the previous status. So it's the task of the physician to make sure that the change will become permanent. And some patients succeed with that, some don't. And let's say after 6 months, we have to remind the patient, you are sick, you have myocardial infarction, your heart is unhealthy. You forgot what you promised us 3 months ago. But this is a very, very difficult task. It has to be done by the physician, by his family, by the media. In Israel, I spoke before about the critical 90 minutes we want the patient in the hospital. Why 90 minutes? Because when an artery is occluded, it's a question of time when the area around this occluded artery will die. After it's dead, we have no clue. So there will be a scar, there will be loss of heart function, etc. If it's a viable state and the artery is opened in time, the area will not die and the heart infarction is prevented. So the time is important and on the short run and on the long run. And we can change it. And for instance, in Israel, in the media, in TV, we have among the commercials, if you feel numbness, if you feel weakness of your hand, if suddenly it's difficult to speak, don't take a sedative and go to sleep to relax. Call an ambulance and go to the hospital. It might be a stroke. And if it arrives to the hospital on time, the stroke is prevented. Otherwise, if it comes tomorrow, there is no need, no use of opening the artery, because all the areas surrounding this artery is dead already. If we open the arteries, there are no living cells there that will use the oxygen supply. So these factors are very important. Education of the population is #1 factor. Because if the subject who feels bad will go to sleep, he will miss the ability to be safe. So the media, the television, the radio, the movies, all these are the internet means how to educate the population, how to instruct them what to do if something happens. And we can save lives.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zimlichman.
Dr. Purugganan, procedure and you take. Is that the problem?
I'm not in the I don't know where my husband.
Yes, he was also a patient who had cardiovascular disease a few years back. That technology is not yet available, but I'm not sure we will do discussion.
I will tell you the truth, it's not available worldwide, and it's not a method that you can use in every primary care clinic. It is a very sophisticated equipment, but let's say, do we really need that? We need that in specific cases. And if you have a patient who is blood pressure is untreated, diabetes, lipids, if you do the measurements, you can find them. Say, your biological age is 10 years more than your chronological age. Do this and this and this. Now, if you take the patient and you will not have his biological age, you know what can help you. And you can instruct him in the same way. And if he comes back and he succeeded to normalize his blood pressure and lipids and glucose and change his lifestyle, if you do the measurement, it will be better, but you know it's going to be. So all these methods and equipment is used mainly today, mainly for research, to show what we are doing, that we are right in doing this, to compare two different medications, to know which one is better. But generally, we don't know what will worsen the condition and what will help the condition. I must add that there are several companies, because the equipment that we use, the cost of the equipment starts at $50,000 a piece. We have 5 or 6 different types of equipment that measure our given properties. So this is not something that can be done in a family physician clinic. Now there are several companies developing equipment smaller, which is evaluated now whether how it is accurate, what is the accuracy, the sensitivity of these pieces, and the lowest they can match is $1,500 per unit, which starts to be reasonable, because if you go 50 years ago, blood pressure machine was supposed to be several $100, was not available for everybody. So maybe in the future we'll be able to put our finger inside the machine and get the results. Probably this will be the case. But today you know what will improve your condition. If you measure it, you are more persuasive. You can convince the patient you succeeded. See, it was 10 and now it's 5. You improved much. But this is maybe more psychology than that. So at the moment we do it in limited groups of patients, and it's not a wide one.
The good thing about biological age is it can be reversed like
Okay, thank you. We can take one more question. Okay, so if there are no more questions, we conclude now our open forum session. And we'd like to thank our friends from the media who joined today. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here despite the traffic. We'd also like to thank Dr.